Hello. Yeah, I'm Paul Wright, and I wrote the first book on Oracle forensics. So in here, I have a copy of my book, which I wrote in 2007. This is a present for Laszlo Zoth, who's invited me here today. So I'm going to give this to you after. Thank you for the invitation. Little did I know that we wouldn't be able to actually get a screen on here. So I don't know if it's going to play it with your video, because I'm going to have to address this as my main monitor, okay? So you guys understand what's happening in the presentation. Can you all hear me okay? Excellent. Right, am I too loud or too quiet or about right? About right, thank you. It is hot in here, isn't it? Anyway, so relax, calm down. Lovely. So who am I? I've been credited in 6 Oracle alerts. So basically, I've got a lot of experience with Oracle, 15 years at Oracle. I was the first SANS instructor for outside of the US for Oracle and Java. SANS are an organization in America who do lots of security for US Navy and nuclear weapons. So the folks there were very early on in IT security. I consult to financial institutions in London. So I finished 2 years with JP Morgan, investment bank. I actually turned down a job for a bank this week. I had a phone call as I was packing my bag for Hacktivity. And I said, I can't work for you because I'm going to Budapest. So it's worth it, actually. The city is beautiful. It's beautiful. So I'm very glad that I've come. And thank you for the welcome. So I have a book coming out. Now, obviously, I'm not just here to plug my book, because I don't want you guys to go away disappointed. I've come here to give you a preview and to share some of the knowledge that I've gained from working on 12C for 2 years. Because I was at a financial institution, I was given privileged advanced knowledge of 12C and other Oracle beta software. And I'm still under NDA, but the fact is the beta has now finished, so I can talk to you about the things that I learnt and share that with you. So that is the idea. So you guys don't seem to take questions in the middle because of the microphone, so I will leave some time for questions at the end, okay? We'll have to speed up. Right. Okay, so this is the structure of the presentation. I'm going to do a demo. I'm going to try and do a demo with the display, you know. I'm going to show you defenses, and I'm going to show you some improvements in 12C, some of the actual features of 12C that are going to make your life more secure as Oracle folks. So really, in a way, it's a kind of incentive to upgrade, yeah? That's point 3. And then I'm going to talk about conclusions and ethical reporting. Now, I hope you can see this, but moving on to the sort of the things that are wrong with Oracle 12C. We're going to start with the negative, unfortunately, but there are privilege escalations in the 12C database. Now, the interesting thing is some of these apply to 11G, but specifically in the 12C GA, which is called, and I'm going to speak a bit more slowly because I understand for some of you, English may be a second language. So the GA is generally available. That means 12C is for everyone, okay? Now, in this version, if I get my trusty pointer, so yeah, 12.1.0.1.0, that is the public version. So you can all go to Oracle's website, you can download it, you can test it, and as long as you're within the license, 20-odd days for developer, then you can use that, is my understanding, obviously subject to your own arrangements with Oracle. So what we have in the 12C release are these directories, okay? So if you do this query, select directory name, directory path from DBA directories, you'll see there's a directory called Oracle Base. Now, that's interesting. What is that? I'm going to try and make sure you're awake. What does that mean? Go on, somebody tell me. What does it mean? What does that slash mean as a directory path? Thank you. Root. It's the root directory. It's the top of the tree. So if you see that as a directory, what do you think? You think, well, a directory, let me explain what a directory is. It's a way of the database accessing the operating system underneath. If the database can access the operating system, it can overwrite the password file and bypass all your security. You do not want the database talking to your operating system directly, especially not to privileged areas. So the question is, why was this released? In the GA, why did they leave directories in there? I think the reason is, because what happened with the beta testers is we were basically not allowed to see the last public release before it went out, so I didn't see this before it went out. But I think the thought was there's no privileges on this directory within the database. So if you do a select from DBA directories, there are no or DBA tab privs, there are no privileges on this directory. So Oracle base, it's there, but you can't use it. Does that make sense? Well, guess what? There are ways of exploiting these directories, which I'm going to show you. And really, if you're going to, I mean, I encourage you to use 12c because it's a great database. Oracle is still the best database vendor in the world, and I can prove that to you, and I'll debate it with you outside if you want. For performance, they outstrip everybody else. They're the fastest database on the planet. So it's still a great database, but they need a little bit of help with the security. So when you guys install, you need to make sure that you've done a check and an audit after to make sure that it's secure. Okay, so how would you use those directories? Now, Advisor is a privilege that's well known in Oracle, and the documentation and all of the books I've read on it say that in order to write to the OS, you need to have some kind of permission on the directory, okay? Now, what I found from the documentation and from actually using it is that you do not need any privileges to the OS in order to use Advisor, okay? So I just come back from Oracle Open World in San Francisco. What's new? Columnar databases that are in memory, very fast. So Oracle, again, concentrating on performance. The other thing that was new was Microsoft were presenting for the first time at Oracle Open World. Very interesting. What this shows is that the future really is integration. We're looking at people like yourself are highly skilled technicians being able to integrate Microsoft and Oracle and IBM and all the different companies. Now, this bug is interesting because it's an integration bug. Because guess what? That root directory, guess where it points to on Windows, right? You will have known that roots can't be addressed by Oracle on Unix, so they're probably thinking, guys, we're not worried about Oracle being able to write to roots on Unix because Oracle can't anyway because of the Unix permissions. But on Microsoft, C drive, you can write directly to the root of C using that directory in Oracle with the Advisor privilege. So that is a virus writer's dream. It really is. So you can write any file you want to write to the C drive from Oracle using one privilege. Okay? So what do we know from this? What we know is for integration guys, collaboration with Microsoft is needed. It's very important because 12.1 on Windows is not secure. Okay? So how are we doing for time? Right, I'm going to do the demonstration. Now, bear with me, because obviously I can't see on my screen here, so I may, we'll see how this goes, yeah? Okay. Now. Okay. Can you guys read this at the back? Well, if you can't see it, there's no point in me doing it, you see. So that's all, because obviously it's taking time. I don't want you to, Okay, so now the thing with 12c is the concept that's very important is that you have a CDB, which is like the mothership, okay? So Hacktivity is the CDB. I am a PDB, because I'm a guest, I'm within Hacktivity, and the idea is that Hacktivity and 12c CDB consolidates these PDBs together onto the mothership, okay? So now this vulnerability I'm going to show you is from the CDB, okay? So if we take our details here, right. Okay, now you can tell you're in the CDB with this little query, okay, yes. So you're in the CDB, you know you're in the mothership, and this Oracle base directory I told you about that points to roots in Unix, but without any permissions and without any ability. But on Windows, gives you the ability to write to the C drive, okay? There's no permissions on it, okay? Now, what I would say, some folks are using Oracle script to create users in the CDB. Don't do that, because if you do that, you can't drop the user, you can't manage the user. You're going outside of Oracle's user management if you do that. So my advice, from having worked with Oracle 12c for quite a while, is not to use the Oracle script method for creating users, okay? Now, we're going to drop this user to start with, and then we're going to create them again. In fact, we can do all this in one go, can't we? So let's use batch mode, okay? And then we're going to go and connect as our new user. So what we've done, we just create a user, we create session, an advisor, and then we're going to connect as that user. And we know there are no privileges, and all we're going to do is just prove to you that, well, in fact, first of all, let's show you what's in the file to begin with, and then that will, yeah, what's in the autoexec.bat? It's got my commands in there. Autoexec.bat runs when you start the Windows, and it runs your scripts and whatever. It's like init.d with Unix and Linux. So, okay, so what is in our autoexec.bat? Good content. That's what's in our autoexec.bat. And when we run our advisor, and we go back again, what do we have? Bad content. Okay. I don't want to give you virus code when I first meet you, because I'm polite, but that shows you that by default in 12c, you can just write to the C drive directly at the root, okay? So I don't need to explain any further for you, the people here, I don't think. Okay, so that is an issue. Now, the thing is, what does that mean? What's the actual implication of that problem? Now, the implication is we need to know who has advisor privilege. You know, advisor is a monitor. Really, this privilege is for sort of junior DBAs or people who are monitoring, maybe developers, DevOps guys. They're given this privilege just so they can read stuff and find out about performance issues on the database. Right. Now, DB and SMP, so you know SNMP, it's a monitoring protocol, and this is for database, and that has the advisor privilege. The point about DB and SMP, it's used by grid control, now called cloud control, to control the whole network. So this credential and user account is everywhere, and it's used all the time, because one DBA here will manage many databases around the estate, okay? So this is a very important account to secure. Right. Now, the thing is, cloud control, which is the new grid control, does not encrypt the sessions for DB and SMP. So it's a plain text session. And obviously the authentication is encrypted, but that's a known process. And if you have the hash for that encryption, then you can decrypt it as documented on soonerorlater.who website. So, you know, what we can say is that, you know, if you have the hash for DB and SMP, an attacker on the network is going to get the plain text. Now, the thing is, though, you only need the hash if it's not the default password. If it's the default password, you don't need any network stuff, yeah? So, DB and SMP by default will have the DB and SMP password, the default password, and commonly in a fresh install will be expired, okay? The idea being that expiring that password has meant that when DB and SMP logs on, they have to change the password to a new value. It can't be the same as before, yeah? Password history. This is what DBAs do. They say, look, I'm the boss. I'm going to tell you developers and everybody, you're going to have to change your password. So you expire it, and you feel comfortable. Problem is this. Using alter user identified by values, you bypass the password function in Oracle. This is published by a friend of mine, Steve Karam, over in Berkeley. And you know, it's a bit of a subtle security issue, but for somebody who's had to work in-house for a long period of time, it's a very obvious security problem. And the problem is that how do you force your junior DBAs and application owners and your monitoring people, and even the security folks, to update their passwords? How do you do it? And the way you do it is you expire their accounts and you have a password complexity function. But if they can bypass it, if I own an application, the last thing I want to do is change my password, because I'm going to have to change all the scripts, all the batch jobs, all the monitoring systems, everything that it does to integrate to that application. It's maybe cost me a month of change time, having to go through that process, and that's money. So I want to avoid changing the password for my applications, and using auto-user identifier by values, I could do that. So I think Oracle should listen to Stephen Cram and to fix that, and it has actually got better in 12c, as we'll see. Okay, so how are we doing for time? Okay, not too bad. Yeah. Now, here's a new one for you. So you won't have heard this already because I found it, and I'm telling you now. I have told Oracle already, but this is non-public. I would actually ask you not to, there's going to be a delay on the video, and I'd ask you not to, just take this to work and use it internally. Now, the idea of this is that segregation of duty is very important for an Oracle internal domain. So you have your DevOps, the senior developers, you have the DBAs, you have the Unix guys, you have people who just come in as public, and you have people who can monitor. Now, granting the object privilege is a system privilege that is only ever granted to junior DBAs or DevOps. The purpose of the privilege is simply to be able to fix schema permission problems. So I don't know if you know, if you're the owner of an object in Oracle, you have very high privileges on that object. But you don't want people logging in as the owner. So really you need a lower privileged account that can manage the schema objects, And this is what granting the object privilege does. You give it to a developer who's got some privileges for release, and he will fix any little schema privileges. Specifically, it exempts the dictionary. So in Oracle, you have the sys dictionary, and that is the castle of Oracle. It's the defense, the castle, that dictionary where sys owns the dictionary. That is what you have to protect. Granting the object cannot get into sys. There was a parameter in 9i called 07 dictionary accessibility, and that will stop non-sys users from messing with your castle, with messing with the dictionary. Right. So granting the object privilege is a junior privilege for non-sys objects. And as well, to secure this DevOps guy from abusing the privilege, they're not allowed to grant any privileges using the privilege to themselves, right? So I can only grant it to you here in the front, and you here. I can only grant it to you. I can't grant it to me. Okay. Now, I've put some code on there. I can demo this because I've got time. So, what we're going to do. So GOOP is just granting the object privilege. Now, this is going to be in the PDB, okay? So now we're in the PDB. You can normally tell the PDB because the name of the database will have PDB in it quite often. Now, okay, so it's given us the PDB. So let's just drop the user, we're going to create the user, and then we're going to grant the role. Now what we're doing here, we're going to create a user who's just got create session and grant the object privilege. Okay? Right. And we're going to connect back as this new low privilege user. This user that we've created who's a low privilege guy. Okay. Do you know when I turn around it suddenly gets louder? Is that because of the extra microphone? I wonder. Anyway. So let's connect as the new low privilege. Hold on, we have something there. Oh, because don't worry. Yeah. Let's go. We need to connect. So here we are. Excuse me. It might be because it's, I might have got a thing in there. Hold on. Okay. So we're going to drop the user, create the user, and grant it some privileges. Right. And then connect. Right, we're connected. Great. Now, so we've created our low-priv user. He's our DevOps guy. And this DevOps guy, he's not allowed to grant himself directory privileges, because the point of directory privileges is they're owned by sys. Yeah? Sys is protected from the DevOps guys. It's our castle. We don't want to let them in the castle. Yeah? So, DevOps guy cannot grant on sys, and they can't grant themselves. But guess what? These middle privileges, there we go, enforced. You may not grant revoke. But the role that the DevOps guy has that is inheriting from, so the DevOps guy has a role, as a parent role. You can grant. Right, do you see the bug? The bug is, I can't grant to me, but I can grant to my roles. That is a classic. I mean, if I can teach you one thing today, if you're auditing Oracle, that is the classic problem. So you need some kind of recursive, and unfortunately in 12.1, that is a bug there. That means that if you're production DBA, so I work a lot with production DBAs, and as, I work as a production DBA, I need to ensure that a developer doesn't accidentally run code that crashes the database, as a minimum. And also need to stop other people from coming in and getting data that they're not authorized to get. So, this is a bug. It's reported to Oracle already, and they are fixing it at this moment. So, but there are. I've got some juicier ones than this in my book, which isn't out yet, which I'm waiting for Oracle to fix and tell me I can publish. But yeah, you can actually buy an advanced copy if you want. So there's the plug for the book you were waiting for. No, that's worth looking at. So there's my second demo. Okay. Hey, both of my demos have worked. I like Budapest. Right? So, right, we've done our second demo. Yeah. How do you defend against this stuff? Right. So, first of all, you're going to drop your directories. You've got directories and external tables. We're going to drop those directories and external tables. Raise a ticket with My Oracle Support before you do that. Say to Oracle, is it okay? Am I still supported? What do you think is the bad ramifications of this? Hopefully, they'll just say no problem, and then you drop the directories that are there. I mean, a first release of Oracle always has lower QA than the .2 release. So a lot of people will be waiting for 12.2 before they actually install in production, as you know. So the next thing you would do is protect DBNSMP. Now, this is really important, okay? DBNSMP, you're going to put password complexity on it. You're going to put password history on it. But if somebody can bypass this using auto-identified by values, the thing you have to do is go back and regularly check. It's not being put back to the default password. Okay? So you need really some kind of monitoring system. I mean, there are third parties like McAfee and these guys. But the best way, just have a Perl script that zoots in every day, every week, and checks there's no defaults that have been put back. Okay? That's very important. And you'll find that all major banks now are state-checking their estates on a regular basis to make sure that a default doesn't get put back in. Because it does. When you get a new install of a database, the DBAs and developers are paid by producing good software quickly, whereas we are thinking it needs to be secure as well, which takes a bit longer. Okay, now with Orodebug, the next one, I should mention actually, with DBNSMP, I mentioned before about Decrypt, which Laszlo Zoth has produced, which is a proof of concept to show that you can decrypt to the plain text. The mitigation for that in the long term is using SSL. So you're going to use OpenSSL or Stunnel to protect the session. Now, what Oracle have done, and this is really cool, Oracle have made TCPS completely free of charge on all versions of Oracle database, client to server. So I'm not talking about from the listener to the instance on the back end, which was done a while ago, cost, thanks to Jobson Correa. What I'm talking about is from clients to the database. This is called Advanced Security Option. It cost a fortune, a lot of money, and Oracle have very kindly made that completely free of charge, not just on 12c, on every version of their database. So I recommend that you start to use that in your organizations. Now, that's the positive side. Obviously, there's going to be some labor in terms of testing this stuff. You've got to get it installed, you've got to make sure it works, you've got to get the change tickets organized so that all the old software works with the new SSL. That means there's lots of work in this area. So the fact that you've got advance notice that TCPS is now free means you can go out and consult and deploy that in the organizations that you work with, okay? So I think that's pretty cool. But Oracle haven't put this on cloud control yet. So cloud control is still an area of interesting security research and also for pen tests and auditing. Next, Auradebug. Laszlo presented on Auradebug here, as you know, and also David Litchfield, my ex-colleague from NGS. Auradebug, I was actually working for a client when this was released, and it was quite amusing because I'd just done a big syslog install, and somebody said, hey, somebody can turn off your syslog. I thought, damn, what do I do? Well, there is a balance to this, because what you find with syslog on rack is that the clusterware generates so much activity into syslog that basically you've got a heartbeat monitor. And that heartbeat, if you have a gap, that will tell you that somebody's turned off auditing or somebody's rebooted. Something's happened to the database. Now, if you look at the startups in Oracle, you know the startups because they're there in that view there, which you can see. So this view, DBA HIST database instance, that gives you a record of all the startups, yeah? Now, what that is going to do is tell you all the authorized gaps in your syslog. If there are any other gaps, maybe that's somebody using Auradebug to turn off the audit trail because they want to select the credit card numbers or something similar to that, okay? Now, that leads into a very interesting thing. Well, first, I have a challenge for you, and this is a general research challenge to the good people at Hacktivity. Given that the clusterware in rack is creating all of this activity, this heartbeat activity, an attacker might try to make their actions look like the system, yeah? So, if a very knowledgeable attacker was coming into Oracle, they would run commands that look like clusterware commands. So what we've got is a kind of AI problem. How do you tell the difference between machine system activity and human activity on syslog for rack? If that's a challenge, I've not solved it yet, and maybe you guys can do that. I went to University of Manchester where Alan Turing studied, who's in my department, and they still haven't solved that problem, but maybe we can do that together, yeah? Okay, so what else can we use Oracle Syslog for? The answer is this, native IPS. Now, there are some things that go into your audit trail that are nowhere else on your system, okay? It is gold. Your Syslog audit trail is gold. An example, if you wanted to stop a database link, the only way of knowing an incoming database link is from your audit trail. It's the only way you know that it's a database link. In the database itself, when a database link comes from you, say for instance, you're in the front row here, if you were the source of a database link and I was the server, you could connect to me and I can't stop you. Now that is a problem. Why? Because database links that come in are anonymized. So an attacker can use it to hide their client details. But also, database links come from quite often from a low security, high-risk area like your development servers. And an attacker will pivot from the development servers to your production through the database link. Okay? Also, database links have insecure passwords. I'd encourage you to go to Laszlo and Frank's talk tomorrow, where they will discuss some of the technicalities of the password encryption, which I will be at as well. It'll be a very interesting presentation tomorrow. Now, so what is the result of this? Payment processing companies that I've worked with in the past, they have basically had a policy that we're going to ban all database links. Now, that's great, but how do you enforce it? How would you stop anybody from using database links? Does anybody know? And the answer is, yeah, you can't, it's very difficult to do. So what the community has needed is a way to block incoming database links. Now, I've put some of this in the book, but I'm going to share with you guys here some of the detail from my book so that you can play with this, and maybe you can give me ideas as well, who knows. Now, the problem with blocking incoming database links, there have been some attempts to do this using a trigger. The problem with a trigger to kill this incoming database link is that a trigger cannot kill its own session. Oracle cannot kill itself, okay? This is worth knowing. So the only way you can kill an Oracle session is from a different session. And that makes sense, doesn't it? You don't want sessions accidentally killing themselves. Now, how do you know that a session is a database link? The answer is you don't, unless you read from the audit trail. So we have a position here where a very interesting piece of information, i.e. DB link info, that information about whether a session is a DB link or not is only accessible from your audit trail. At last, the audit trail is useful for something. Instead of leaving it on a server and never reading it, we're going to use it for something. We're going to stop an attack while it happens, right? And that's worth money. Reading the audit trail after the attack has happened is not so valuable, is it? I mean, it's useful for forensics, my book, over half a decade, but really what we want is to stop them from happening in the first place, don't we? Yeah? Right. So how would you do it? Now, the technique is this. You use the AUD-SID from the audit trail if you have a DB link info field populated. And then you use this thing here, minus capital F. Who knows what the difference between minus small f and minus capital F is? I challenge you, don't be shy. Who knows the difference between small f and capital F here? I was the same as you. Because nobody, for the video, nobody has put their hand up. And that may just because you're all asleep. I'm only joking. Right, minus capital F does a very, very interesting thing. Minus capital F on tail here, that moves the name of the file when it fills up the inode. Because normally on Unix, if you did this tail minus capital F, it would fill up an inode, and then it would stop. With capital F, it will keep that command running forever. So it will automatically change the inode, rename the file, and swap it over for you. Very cool. Very, very cool. Right, so this command here, using my shell script, will basically run on the server, reading the syslog from Unix. You could run it as root, so the Oracle database can't touch it, and it will block a session that comes in as it happens from your audit trail. So you've got real-time blocking, yeah? So this is cool, and this is native IPS, and I'm sharing this with you because I think this tail minus F opens an opportunity for everyone to start using their audit trail, which, in the future, we're going to have this kind of thing going on. You're going to have peer-to-peer Oracle databases that are sending syslog to their nearest neighbor. You can imagine this like a herd of giraffes, alerting each other naturally. Instead of having a hierarchical system where one guy tells everybody, oh, there's an alert, they alert to each other, these databases, peer-to-peer, yeah? And maybe they're adaptive. They go up and down in risk level, depending on threat. So these exciting things. Right, now looking at the time, I need to move a bit quicker. So what built-in security improvements are in 12c? You've got a ORDebug protection. So if you try to do ORDebug and try and touch a file to delete the trace file that says you've been in ORDebug, you can't do it in 12c remotely, okay? Definer roles. What this means is you no longer need public privileges for development. Instead of granting to public all your privileges, you create a role, a new role, for instance, definer public. you grant all your privileges to that, and then grant that define a public role to your stored procedure. No need for public. Okay. Password hash is still the same, SHA-1 instead of SHA-2. The docs will say that it's SHA-2, but it's not out yet. And then I've been asking for this since 2007. I wrote a paper when I was working for NGS on Oracle passwords, and that paper basically showed that SYS is the least protected account in the whole database, which, given that it's the most privileged, is a bit of a mistake, I think. But really, this shows that Oracle's philosophy is availability. You can't lock out the admin, yeah? That is the worst thing that can happen. So in Oracle, you're pleased because you can never get locked out as SYS, but the problem is that there was no failed login delay. There was no delay for brute force attacks. So that's been fixed. I gave Oracle criteria. I just said, why don't you just put 1 second delay on SYS? And they've done that, which is really excellent. So I'm very pleased with Oracle. And 12C is more secure than 11G because of that one thing. Okay. Now, unfortunately, though, you still have no profiles on SYS. So there's no password control, no complexity. Okay. So I think we're just about right for time. In conclusion, I went a bit fast through that. Were there any questions on that last slide? Is that okay? Good. Okay, so what conclusions do we have? Conclusions. The conclusion is security is moving to be embedded. So the idea is there are vendors, and there are vendors here, and they're very good. But in the long term, the security will become embedded into the database, so native IPS using the native audit trail. Oracle has actually got the best audit trail of any database, and again, that's something I can debate or improve with you. But so that's something I would say definitely use it. You don't necessarily have to buy a third-party vendor. The other thing is regarding bugs. 12C is quite new, so the container system, this CDB, PDB system, when you come to use it, you might come across the odd little bug. So if you do, I would recommend reporting to this email address at Oracle. And the idea is that if it's a security bug, they will actually credit you in their security alert that's quarterly, and you'll get your name on the Oracle website, which means that people know that you've done the research and it's good for your CV. You can get work in consultancy. I think you know about this already. But everything I've talked about today in terms of vulnerability work, I've already told Oracle about. And so I'd encourage you to do that. January 2013, they credited me in that alert. So I've put lots more examples of attack and defense code in my book, for Press and Springer. I think that's the correct pronunciation. Springer. Okay, I would say Springer in English, but basically for Press, the book is for. And you can actually order that today on Amazon if you want to do a pre-order. And just in case they run out of stock, you never know, you'll be able to get yourself one of those. So that really is sort of moving towards the end of my presentation. Thank you.